Hey, I'm Dave. Welcome to my shop. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey that starts with lighting a single LED. Then we'll make the jump to colored LEDs, then to an LED strip, and then to an addressable strip, and finally to a matrix of pixels receiving color video data over Wi-Fi. And at each step, I'll show you how we build on the step before to add one more piece to the puzzle. Now, I've got a bit of an LED obsession. My shop is largely lit by various LED projects that I've built over the years. As an example, I've upgraded my patio umbrella with real-time flames. Under my eaves and on my front pillars are strips that can be set to any number of remotely controlled effects ranging from Christmas lights to summertime fireworks. On the matrix, there's a range of audio effects, stock market updates, weather forecasts, and more. And it's all the same code. Before we can run, though, we should learn to walk. And that means that before we get fancy and start drawing effects on a matrix, we need to start with something simple, like controlling a single LED. Now, with a single color LED, you don't really need any electronics except for a current limiting resistor in line with the 5-volt power supply. As soon as you provide power, the LED lights up and produces whatever color it was designed to produce. An LED produces visible light through a process called electroluminescence. When electric current passes through the LED's semiconductor material, electrons and holes recombine in that material. This recombination releases energy in the form of photons, which are particles of light, or waves. It's complicated.
Oh, that's better.
The wavelength, and thus the color, of the emitted light depends on the energy band gap of the semiconductor material used in the LED. They're handy for an indicator light perhaps, but not all that interesting, yet. Keep in mind that at its standard power, an LED always produces precisely the same wavelength or color, and that's the only color that it can produce. For decades, we were limited to just red or green or combining them to make yellow, but by the 90s, blue finally came along, giving us the ability to mix and match from the entire rainbow of colors. If you're wondering why they didn't just use white LEDs with a color filter, that's because before blue came along, there was no way to make a white LED. Even the white LED light bulbs that you're likely using in your house for illumination aren't actually white LEDs. They use a blue or ultraviolet LED chip coated with a phosphor material that converts part of the blue or UV light into yellow light. The combination of blue or UV and the yellow light emitted by the phosphor combine to create white light. These days, we're fortunate in that you can buy an RGB LED that allows you to produce red, green, and blue independently on separate pins. There's a red pin, a green pin, and a blue pin. You can see in this diagram I've included an ESP32 chip, which for now we'll just treat like a magic box that can turn off and on individual pins that control the red, green, and blue pins of the LED. By powering various combinations of those pins, we can create other fully saturated colors like yellow, magenta, cyan, and so on. But because each of the red, green, or blue pins would either have to be fully on or completely off, all we'd be able to achieve are the fully saturated primary color combinations. To achieve a complete mix of colors and brightness, we need to be able to selectively dim each of the red, green, or blue components so we can mix and match more easily. Let's say we can set each pin from 0 to 100%, or since it's a computer, from 0 to 255, which is 8 bits of color info. With all 3 pins combined, that would give us our full 24-bit color on the LED. So how do we get varying levels of red, green, and blue? Well, in theory, it could be done by varying the voltage or the current through the LED legs, but that's not the right or the most flexible approach. Instead, we're going to use pulse width modulation, or PWM, to turn each color leg off and on thousands of times per second, far faster than the human eye can hope to perceive. We'll send the LED a square wave signal, but for each pulse that the square wave signal has, we'll control the ratio of the time that the LED spends off versus on, which will give us complete control over the brightness. Let's have a look at a few PWM waveforms. At the top, we can see a 50% duty cycle, meaning the signal is on precisely 1/2 the time and off the other half. Now this happens 5,000 times a second and will, even to fast cameras, appear as an LED at half brightness. If we wanted it brighter, we could up the duty cycle to 75% so that it was on 3/4 of the time. Or we could reduce that to 25% so that the LED functioned at 1/4 of the apparent brightness. I say apparent because it just looks to us like it's being dimmed, whereas in reality it's always either fully on or fully off, and it's just the ratio of those times that make it look to our eyes as if it's being smoothly dimmed. It's also important to note that LEDs turn off and on effectively instantly with no warm-up or cool-down time, so this process is nicely linear, meaning that being on 25% of the time looks 25% as bright as fully on. All we need to be able to do is to generate the square wave signal that carries our pulse width modulated brightness to each of the color legs, and we should be able to instantly mix and match any color we want at any brightness. But how do we generate a fast square wave signal with a variable duty cycle? Now, there are people in the world that could crank out something with 555 timers on the back of a napkin, but I am not one of those people. To me, it sounds complicated to generate this signal, but fortunately, the ESP32 chip has onboard hardware to do it all for us. The chip actually has LED controllers built in, designed specifically to produce just what we need. We simply select a pin, connect it internally to the LED controller, and tell it the refresh rate we want, and then we just set the duty cycle. The hardware does the work of turning the pin off and on for us at the right time and rate. Now, it's not essential that you understand this code, but to avoid keeping it mysterious or just waving my hands about it, here's how an ESP32 could control a single RGB LED to achieve any color. First, the 3 pins that are connected to the LED are set as outputs. Next, we attach an LED controller in the ESP32 to each of those 3 pins, and we specify that we want a 5000 Hz frequency, meaning that the LED will be cycled 5000 times per second. The set RGB function does the work of setting the duty cycle for each color pin to a value between 0 and 255. And in the loop function, we see that the set RGB function is called with a red of 128, a green of 0, and a blue of 128. And since 128 is half of 255, it means that the red and blue will be on half the time, and that the green will stay off. 50% red combined with 50% blue gives us 50% magenta. If we connect an oscilloscope to the red and blue pins, we can see a square wave with a duty cycle that is exactly half on and half off. And if it's mentally bothering you that 128 is not exactly half of 255, be sure to check out my new book in the video description. You might find it of interest. Now, when we power up the module, sure enough, we get a single magenta pixel exactly as we intended. Okay, so we've got color control of a single RGB pixel, but it's still just one LED. I want many LEDs. And if you think about it, we could simply connect the same circuit to a whole set of LEDs in a long parallel chain by connecting all the red legs to our red pin on the ESP32, green legs to the green pin, and blue legs to the blue pin. I've only drawn 3 LEDs here for simplicity, but all that really matters is that the ESP32 pins can source enough current for whatever LEDs you connect. All 3 that we connect here will be the same color that we command. Here's an example I did early on where the code reads the values of the potentiometers and uses that to mix a color wheel. You can buy LED strips that are wired just like this, with a ground and 3 inputs, or sometimes a power and 3 grounds. Either way, you connect their color inputs to your ESP32 pins, and as you vary the color being output on the color pins, the entire strip changes color. That's great if that's what you want, but other than cycling color and setting ambient lighting, since the entire strip is always the same color, there's still not a lot more you can do with it. But imagine if we could control the color and brightness of each little individual LED somehow. Then we'd really be onto something. The problem, of course, would be the wiring. With 4 wires, including the ground, connected to each LED, it would be a horrible maze of wiring. And even if you could make that work, we'd still be limited to the number of pins we actually have on the ESP32 to control them, so we wouldn't actually get very far anyway. Fortunately, a few years back, the individually addressable LED was introduced to the market. You might have seen them called NeoPixels, or sometimes the more generic WS2812B. They allow you to command a different 24-bit color for each and every LED on the strip. We'll call it an ARGB for Addressable RGB LED, and the wiring is painfully simple because other than power and ground, there's just one wire, a data wire. How does it do it? Well, just like our single color LED, it uses pulse width modulation to control the intensity of the red, blue, and green LEDs. But it does it all behind the scenes, because if you look very closely at a zoomed-in view of one of these ARGB LEDs, you can see a little black spot. And that's actually a microcontroller, so that, no joke, every single one of these LEDs has its own internal chip that handles the data signal and controls the LED for color for you. And yet you can buy these LEDs in strip form for pennies a piece, so they really must have got the cost down on those little microcontrollers. To connect an ARGB LED to our ESP32, we need to supply power and ground as always, but then there's just a single pin used to connect to the LED. That's the data wire, and thanks to a library called Fast LED that we're going to use, we don't need to know anything about the communication format that goes on behind the scenes. We'll simply tell the library what color to set our LEDs to, and the rest is magic. And you could certainly continue to treat it as magic forever, but the odds are if you're watching my channel, you're at least a little bit curious about what's going on here, so here's my brief summary. The Fast LED library uses one of the pins on the ESP32 to generate a square wave data signal. Now, this is not a pulse width modulated brightness signal, but instead it's a binary signal that carries the 24 bits of color information for each LED. The data pin carries a square wave signal at a fixed clock rate, and a short pulse means a 0. A longer pulse means a 1. If there's no pulse at all for a little while, the whole thing is reset, then you start over. That's it. We simply hand Fast LED an array of 24-bit color values, and it does all the signaling required to cause those colors to appear on our LED strip in the right order. By now, perhaps you're wondering how it actually addresses which LED you want to change the color of. Is there some kind of header or an index? And that's where the WS2812B standard really shines for its simplicity. There is no header or index. The LEDs are wired in series as a chain so that there's a data out wire that connects to the data in of the next LED. Every time there's a reset on the data line to signify a new frame, the first LED starts listening. And it consumes and eats the first 24 bits it sees, sets its color, and then passes anything else that comes in, like the info for the second LED, on the data out pin. By eating one color packet and then passing on the rest, each LED can be completely dumb about its location in the chain. It does mean that you have to redraw the entire set of LEDs each frame, but at a data rate of up to 800 kilobits per second, you can redraw a chain of about 1,000 LEDs 30 times a second without breaking a sweat. But like I said, if it's still akin to magic, that's fine too. You can still use it. And speaking of magic, let's look at the code that we need to use to control an ARGB LED. It's even simpler than the previous code example because that little onboard microcontroller on every LED does the pulse width stuff that we had to do ourselves originally. All we do is to add an array of color values to the Fast LED library, one per LED. Then each time we want to update the LED strip, we set the color data in the array and call Fast LED's show function. And that's it. You've just seen your first complete, individually addressable LED application. Having individual control over the color and brightness of each LED, combined with the power and speed of the ESP32, allow us to achieve some impressive effects. Here's an example that I mentioned earlier of my patio umbrella. ESP32 can actually control 8 different strips at one time at full load, and so each spoke of the umbrella has its own LED strip. Here's an example of the Tiki fire lamp with a strip on each of its 4 arms. It actually started life as a white hanging lamp, but I turned it upside down, created a base, replaced the white LEDs with ARGB strips, and then added the ESP32 inside the body. And the strips don't need to be straight runs. Here's an example of a Threadripper PC with 10 ARGB fans. Each fan has 16 ARGB LEDs in its edge, and the end of one fan is plugged into the start of the next fan so that they form a long chain. Thanks to some simple math, the software that we're using knows how to draw radially on each of the fans. This flame effect is mapped to how busy the CPU is, and here it is at full load. Now, as much fun as coding up effects for strips and fans might be, going to a two-dimensional display like a matrix of LEDs opens up a whole new range of displays and possibilities. The easiest way to build a matrix is to simply wind an LED strip back and forth in what's known as a boustrophodon pattern. That's Latin for as the ox plows, and it's the path that our LED strip will take as it forms a 48 by 16 matrix. So even though we've arranged them as a 2D grid, they're still wired as one long winding chain, so they appear as a simple strip to the ESP32. But to be able to control any LED at a particular X and Y coordinate, we need to figure out where in the chain that LED actually lives, and this simple calculation is the one we need. It accounts for the winding pattern of the LED strip and correctly returns the index of the LED within the strip. Let's use this 48 by 16 grid to build a cool audio spectrum analyzer. We're going to use an open source ESP32 program from nightdriverled.com that I started several years ago to generate the display. All we have to do is compile it as the Spectrum project and connect our single data pin, pin 5, to the data line on the matrix. The ESP module that I'm using in this case is called the M5STIX-C+, and it has a built-in microphone that NightDriver uses to sample the audio 60 times per second. That, plus power and ground, gives us a compelling audio visualizer, like so. Now, it works well enough, but winding strips into matrices only takes us so far because it's a lot of individual LEDs to refresh. Imagine we wanted a 64 by 32 version. That would be more than 2,000 LEDs sharing a single data wire, which means we'd only be able to update the display about 15 times per second. To go larger, we're going to use a surplus LED matrix I picked up on eBay cheaply that used to be part of one of those giant signs on the Vegas Strip, or maybe a departures wall at a train station. Either way, they're generally 64 by 32 and readily available with links in the video description. I'm not even sure what they're called, but Hub 75 seems to be the common refrain, so that's what I've gone with too. Now, the good news is that Night Driver can natively talk to a Hub 75 matrix as long as you're able to connect all the required wiring, and there's a lot of it. In addition to main power and ground, you've got at least 16 connections to make between the ESP32 and the matrix. And I've hand-wired one when I was prototyping, but I quickly realized that A, I never wanted to do that again, and B, nobody else would likely want to either. And so that's when I decided to make my own PCB. Basically, I wanted my dream board with an ESP32 with everything including 8 megabytes of extra memory, a microphone, audio input, IR remote control, and a connector that most importantly plugs directly into the Hub 75 matrix. It makes it completely plug and play. You just plug the little board into the matrix and supply USB-C power. But there were two problems with this dream board of mine. First, I'm not an engineer or even a qualified hobbyist, so I did what anybody would do. I hired some dude in Sri Lanka to help design the schematic in the PCB. When he eventually fell off the radar partway through the project, I had to lean on friends and the generous help of viewers, but we eventually got a design finalized. The second problem was that the board was complicated, with a generous mix of components ranging from the ESP32 itself to the microphone, serial port with debugging support, Hub 75 connector, and so on. Almost all of it is surface mount componentry, and worse yet, there's stuff on both sides of the board. I was more than certain that I wasn't going to be making these here in the shop with an easy bake oven and a solder mask, so what to do? And that's why I partnered with JLCPCB for this episode. They agreed to help produce the boards in exchange for me telling you about them. But the joke's on them because I would have told you about their process anyway, because it's turned out to be a lifesaver for this one. JLCPCB provides the free-to-use Easy EDA software that I use to design and finalize the circuit. I was able to figure it out and map my circuit out in fairly short order. Each time I added a component, I entered the part number from their catalog that I wanted to use, and the Easy EDA software uses that information to figure out the component footprint. That way, once your circuit is complete, you can use all that info to almost automatically lay out the PCB itself. There's even an auto router function. And once your PCB is designed, that's where most people get stuck, because very few people can build their own surface mount PCBs, particularly with a mix of components like this. But that's where JLCPCB comes to the rescue again, as they have a complete assembly service where your board is machine picked and produced, I guess by robots, right at their factory, then sent by courier to your doorstep. They do 100% of the process, and what I receive are completely turnkey, ready to program PCBs. Assuming your circuit was well designed and works, it's next to magic. If you're curious and want to experiment with the services, I've put a couple of coupon links in the video description to get you started. With our PCB in hand, I simply plug it into the back of the matrix, connect the power, and I'm ready to load software onto it. And that's where the Mesmerizer project comes in. It's still the same code from nightdriverled.com, but compiled to drive a Hub 75 matrix with up to 60 different audio-visual and information effects. To load the code onto the board, I'll use their web installer linked off of the project's GitHub page at nightdriverled.com. To use it, I plug the board into a USB port and select Mesmerizer from the dropdowns. When I click connect, the code will be loaded onto the ESP32 automatically. I'll even be given a chance to enter my Wi-Fi credentials so that the Mesmerizer can connect to the web, fetch stock quotes, weather, and more. As soon as the board reboots at the end of the installation, it comes up running as Mesmerizer. Using the IR remote control, you can step through dozens of included effects, change color, brightness, and so on. And the Mesmerizer isn't limited to built-in effects, as it can receive video and effects over a built-in Wi-Fi antenna as well. There's a small app you can run on Windows, Mac, or even Linux on a Raspberry Pi, and it sends the effects over Wi-Fi. Here's an example of it displaying a YouTube video. Yeah, that's right, you just got rickrolled by an LED matrix. In other news, I'll be trying to assemble kits that include the PCB, matrix, cable, remote, and receiver, so again, check the video description if you're interested in a complete Mesmerizer kit. And the last thing you need to check the video description for is the link to the free sample of my new book on Amazon, The Non-Visible Part of the Spectrum. It's largely intended for people that don't have ASD but might experience some of the characteristics of being on the spectrum, or for friends and relatives that know somebody on the spectrum. It's everything I know now about living a successful life on the spectrum that I wish I'd known long ago. Thanks for joining me out here in the shop today. If you found today's episode to be any combination of informative or entertaining, I'd be honored if you'd consider subscribing to my channel and leaving a like on the video. It really does help with the old algorithm. In the meantime and in between time, I hope to see you next time, right here in Dave's Garage.
Do it, Glenn! Do it! Do it!